Okay. And we'll have a monitor, is that right? Yes, I can. All right, and as soon as I see Tim and I pop up, start yapping? Okay.
Will we be in boxes with Jake, or is it back and forth
Ken,
with him?
I am.
Oh, cool.
Okay. And just someone in there, now that we have Jake, I guess Priya's cool to go. Just somebody, when we start talking about the stuff on video, just somebody will say video up. That way he and I, well, he knows it all off the top of his head. I got to use my cheat sheet here. So just somebody can let us know.
We're talking about.
Hello again, everyone. I'm Ken Greiner along with Tim Geidera. And Tim, as Jake Wallace so eloquently put it last night, talking season's on us now.
Exactly. 47 days to the start of the University of Georgia football season. You might make the argument the most anticipated Georgia season ever. The Dogs coming off of a national championship game appearance last year, first SEC title since 2005. The #1 recruiting class in the country, a lot of elements going in, but this is the big day in that countdown because we finally start to talk a little football.
And it is the day that we finally get a hold of Kirby Smart and a couple of other Georgia players as well. The anticipation is really high, too, because you've got everybody expecting Georgia to do it again. When the head coach comes out and said, coaches are always downplaying things. When the head coach speaks words and it winds up on a barn saying, we're not going anywhere, you know, fans believe it.
Yeah, and, you know, he says Georgia's going to embrace these expectations. If you don't have expectations coming into a season, something's wrong. You know,
Exactly.
He's been building this program, and really the Georgia program is built all the time to deal with expectations, and you want people to think that you're going to be one of the better teams, not only in the SEC and in the country, and everybody going into 2018 certainly thinks that of the Bulldogs.
One thing, we always have to be realistic, though. Georgia lost a lot of players last year. I mean, and, you know, the recruiting is great. Jasper Sanks is our poster child. You go back, you never know. So far, it's worked out really well for him. Jake Fromm being a perfect example. Good thing they had Jake Fromm last year. And now, all of a sudden, he's looking a battle with somebody else, with Justin Fields. So he's got players in place, but you still never know what those players are going to do till they absolutely play.
The best 7, 8, 9 players off of last year's team that went to the national championship game were seniors or left the program. You know, of course, Roquan Smith, a junior who chose to leave. So they do have a lot to replace. They also have a lot coming in. They had a lot of kids last year who were in the 2016 recruiting class who didn't play, who now are awaiting their chance. So it's not just all these young players coming in from last year, the 7 5-stars that we heard about, #1 recruiting class. It's a backlog of talent that they've been accumulating.
All right, well, talk about talent. Let's go up to Atlanta. WTOC is in Atlanta for SEC Football Media Days. That is where we find our Jake Wallace. Jake, you've been up there, started sending back reports last night. What's the general consensus up there now that Georgia's had a chance to talk today?
Yeah, Ken, I mean, like you guys were talking, the backlog of talent. So the discussion around this team, much different at this media days than it was even a year ago when people were wondering, is Georgia for real? Can they be SEC champs? They proved it last year, and now those expectations have risen anymore. It came kind of in the form of one question today to Kirby Smart, where he was asked, with these recruiting classes, with that backlog of talent that you guys mentioned, is Georgia at the same place that Alabama is? Are they in the same echelon? Kirby said he doesn't really like those kinds of comparisons. No coach would. It seems like an unrealistic expectation to match. But he did say that no matter how you look at it, the talent on this team now and where Georgia is, it's a lot better than when they got there. Take a listen.
I think the 110 players we bring into camp on August 3rd, we're going to have more depth than we've had. We might not have as much talent. We might not have three first rounders, but what we have is a lot of competition at a lot of positions.
Yeah, so obviously a lot of talent at a lot of positions, and Kirby Smart and everybody in the country knows Georgia has that. It's just going to be a matter of, like you guys mentioned, how do you replace those 7 or 8 seniors who were the leaders on this team last year? It's almost hard to believe that just a couple months ago, Georgia's season ended in this very city, not far from where I am right now in downtown Atlanta. 2nd and 26, I don't need to mention it. All the Georgia fans remember what happened. It was a heartbreaking loss, as heartbreaking a loss as many Georgia fans have felt in quite some time. And the Georgia players felt it too. Don't let them, fool you when they say, oh, that's last year, we're past it. It broke their hearts as well. Jonathan Ledbetter, one of the guys who's here for media days for the Dogs, said he watched the game on his iPad as soon as he could after the game, probably on the bus ride home, and says there was a lot of things that he saw that he liked, but there were also some not so good things, probably that 2nd and 26. And he says seeing that game as soon as it was over just helped motivate him to get back and be there again in 2018.
You can't but help just kind of after watching the game, you realize you did a lot of good things, but you also realize there's so much you could have done differently, like more things that you could have done. You could have done this better. You could have done that better. And it just kind of makes you want that more. You kind of want to go for that last little bit of that last little crumb. You just want to reach out and grab that and attain that, and you just continue to work until you get that.
So you'll hear a little bit more from Ledbetter and Kirby Smart about bouncing back from that loss, if that loss is haunting Georgia this year. That's coming up in a report later on The News at 11. You'll also hear more from Ledbetter himself, a pretty incredible story, a guy who was maybe this close to being kicked off the team 2 years ago, now here as an SEC Media Days rep. I've got that story coming up later on The News at 5 on WTOC. Guys, it's been a really wild day here today. There's been a lot of stuff talked about that we haven't even gotten to, but pretty interesting day here at Media Days. We've been bringing it to you all day, and we're going to bring it to you even more for the rest of the afternoon and the evening right here on WTOC.
All right, Jake, keep up the good work. Look forward to seeing everything else coming out of Atlanta today and tomorrow, of course, because we've got Nick Fitzgerald of Mississippi State, Richmond Hill kid. Jacob will take care of him.
And then South Carolina goes Thursday. So this is 4 days of football all the time, and every fan base is just waiting until their team gets a chance. Today it's Georgia, and one thing you got to like about Kirby Smart is he doesn't really deal in coach speak. A lot of coaches are going to use some cliches, are going to dismiss some expectations. He says, hey, we're not running from anything. We are the team that you want us to be. We're going to embrace these expectations. Also made a big distinction between potential and effectiveness. He says everybody's got potential. He calls potential dormant ability. He says effectiveness is what you do with that potential. And from the last couple of years, it looks like he's not only getting kids into the program, but he's coaching them on the field when he gets them into and making them better football players when they get to Georgia.
Change is inevitable. Growth is not. So that's an option, okay? Hey, let's talk about some of the guys coming back. We're talking about Coach Smart. He says his big concern was leaders on the field. One guy that's going to be a leader, and he's just a sophomore, it's got to be Jake Fromm. Of course, this guy as well, he decided to come back. That's Jonathan Ledbetter. Could have gone out. A lot of people felt like he would have been a top draft pick. Ledbetter decided to come back. He And maybe they set the mold last year for guys staying in school.
You and I talked to Ledbetter in the locker room within minutes after the championship game, and he said he wanted to be this season's Nick Chubb and Sony Michel. A lot was made out of those two players. There was actually about 4 or 5 seniors who could have left after their junior year, but they decided to come back and be leaders and set an example that when you go to Georgia, you're there for the long run. Ledbetter wants to be the guy this year who is going to pass on some institutional knowledge and maybe some experience to younger players.
Okay, as for Jake Fromm, put up great numbers last year. You know, he had a lot of reliability in the backfield with the running game. He didn't have the overall great longevity numbers, but he was very efficient. 62% of his passes, and when they really needed him, he's kind of stepped it up a little bit.
Yeah.
And he's a very accurate passer. He threw some balls. You and I were on the road with him all year last year. He would throw a little needle in there to the only place he could throw it, and that's what the NFL guys are looking for.
Yeah, I mean, freshman of the year in the SEC, and you mentioned this before, he is somebody who gives you maybe a little faith of all the young players coming in this year because he was a highly recruited prospect as well when he came in. Not expected to contribute last year, though, when they had Jacob Eason, but all of a sudden he goes out. If they didn't have Fromm last year, this is a very different season. They don't go anywhere near where they ended up last year.
One guy that will take pressure off of him is DeAndre Swift. Had a great run here against Auburn. This guy was putting up highlights all year long. Swift is going to be that guy, breakaway speed, had a great game against Georgia Tech as well, and of course, who can forget a run, not a touchdown, but caught the ball coming out of the backfield against Florida. Just turned on the burners, and a lot of people are making comparisons to an old Herschel Walker picture there against Florida. So Swift will take some pressure off of Jake Fromm this year.
You just have to hope that nobody's going to rely on him to be the only guy because he's replacing the second and third all-time leading rushers at the University of Georgia, Nick Chubb and Sony Michel. But I think there is going to be another core of running backs back there with Elijah Holyfield, Brian Herrien, who had some valuable runs last year. And then they've got 2 newcomers coming in, Zamir White and James Cook. Dalvin Cook's brother. Dalvin played at Florida State. He's now in the NFL. So as much as Swift is looking to be maybe the number one guy, he's not going to be the only guy.
No, and, you know, Holyfield's, like you say, they've got a great signing class as well.
Oh, yeah.
Let's talk about a couple of local guys. We'll start out first with Nate McBride. McBride, out of Vidalia, had some great plays last year against Florida on special teams. That's what Kirby's looking out after him. And he also said that right now he is getting hold of the defense as well. So another guy, Richard LeCount. Yeah. We have loved following Richard LeCount through his career with Kirby Smart. As we take a look at some of the highlights, got in a good bit of playing time, played in 10 games, started against Notre Dame, had a great game against App State, but you can tell Kirby wants him to come along. He calls him Rat Trap because he's all over the field.
You know, LeCount has a chance to be a leader as a sophomore on this team, which is very unusual because they lost so much in the secondary. They lost almost all of their starters in the secondary. LeCount is stepping in not only with experience, but with the ability to make some plays. And I think really Kirby will look to him on the field as being more than a defensive back out there.
I think he keeps everybody else loose out there too. He loves to have a good time out there. All right, one guy we don't know the status of yet is Demetrius Robertson.
Right.
Got a big announcement this past Sunday. Robertson out of Cal, Savannah Christian kid. He decided Cal wasn't for him, says it was a family matter, so he decided that he would come back. So let's take a little look at him out of high school. This was against Prince Avenue. It was one of the most incredible high school runs I've saw, but what he has is speed.
Right.
And
yeah, he brings a dimension to this offense that they might not have. And, you know, you might call it a third down back kind of guy who you get him the ball in space and let him make some yards after that. Kirby Smart, they said never stopped recruiting him. Not that he was meddling when he was out of Cal, but he let it be known if you ever want to come back home to the state of Georgia and to the University of Georgia, you're welcome here. And, of course, he welcomed them back. Now, NCAA rules stipulate that he would have to sit out a year transferring, but there is an appeal process that he's currently entering. Apparently, there's 4 criteria that you have to meet. They have to do with academics and then also how much you've played and stuff like that. It's going to be a little time before we know. So he will either be a factor this year, but definitely he will be eligible to play next season, if not on the field this year.
Yeah, and the thing is, if he is eligible, he'll have 3 years left.
Right, he doesn't
if he's
lose
not
him,
eligible, they lose him this year, of course. He's also one of those guys that no matter what he does at Georgia, the NFL scouts already know he's got those intangibles they're looking for. So that's another question.
Yeah, he received the medical red shirt for last year at Cal, right?
Yes, he did. And the big thing is, the numbers he put up at Cal as a freshman would have led Georgia in receiving this past year. So that's the kind of talent coming in. Yeah. On the other side of that, Cal does throw the ball a lot. So who on the schedule are you really worried about early
I don't think you can look past week 2 at South Carolina. Georgia goes to Columbia. It's going to be a very difficult game, maybe one of the most difficult on the schedule, especially at that time. Last year they caught South Carolina late in the year, which maybe is when you want to catch them because they don't have the depth. They start to wear down a little bit. Second week of the season, Carolina's as tough as anybody in the SEC.
Yeah, they're going to be the other team in the East this year. So because I still think Florida's got a ways to go. So that's going to be the big game.
But that game, of course, is always big. And then the LSU game, of course, is the one that everybody is circling. But when everybody expects you to win every game, they're all important. Even Austin Peay on opening night.
We saw a few of those games in past years that were real squeakers.
Oh, yeah.
You know, one thing tomorrow, I believe it's tomorrow, where it should come out with the media poll. Who's going to win the conference? I want you, whoever you hear, I want you to keep this number in mind. They've been doing this thing for playing in the SEC championship game for 25 years now. The media has gotten it right 6 of those 25 years. So whatever you hear tomorrow, whoever you think is going to win, it's probably not going to happen. No. So unless it's Georgia,
that's
right?
why I say this might be the most anticipated Georgia season ever because they've come off of championships before, they've come off of the championship game before, but there wasn't social media. There wasn't the conversation about college football that is out there every day now. You know, here we are in July, and we're talking for an extended period of time about what might happen months from now.
Right.
The game is so far ahead of where it was 20, 30 years ago that I think the attention and the excitement about Georgia football is unmatched at this point.
Well, how about what people know as these freshmen are coming in?
Yeah.
Everybody's already talking about a battle between Justin Fields and Jake Fromm. I don't see it yet.
Yeah, nobody knew who the backup quarterback or the incoming freshman quarterback was in 1983, that's for sure.
Okay. All right. I think that's going to do it for now. For Tim, guys, thanks for watching, by the way. This has been a real
And
blast.
Jay's going to have a lot more later on in the news
Absolutely.
from SEC Media Days.
He's churning them out up there.
He's got a lot of material to take care of up there.
Yes, he does. All right. For Tim Guider, I'm Ken Griner. Thanks a lot for watching, folks.